Allow me to set a scene for you. The year is 1999.
Dawn has just broken on a cheery spring morning, the 9th of May to be specific, and for the first time in my life, I am 7 years old. Having woken my parents up way too early to celebrate this most important day of the year and also century, I'm sitting at our dinner table, my favorite breakfast plate in front of me, but I'm not eating, because my attention has been captured by 2 wrapped boxes beside my plate. One of them holds an atomic purple Game Boy Color, the other a copy of Pokemon, blue version, and as soon as I open it, I know what I'm doing with the rest of my day. After 10 minutes of bumping into walls in the starting house trying to find the door, I'm off on my first of many journeys through the world of Pokemon. As the real world fades away, I can faintly hear my mom telling my dad that this present may have been a huge mistake.
That is the first birthday that I can still remember to this day. It's one of my happiest memories, and though my interest in it has waxed and waned as I've grown, Pokemon has been an important part of my life ever since then. Now we're here 20 years later. It's my birthday weekend again, and the single thing that I am most excited about is the release of a new Pokemon movie. So I guess my mom was right.
But if Pokemon did ruin me as an adult, at least it evened the playing field. I'd wager that every person under 30 who's watching this has at least one cherished childhood memory tied to this franchise, not unlike the one that I just shared. And though Detective Pikachu is a really good film that mostly stands on its own merits, it is absolutely banking on all of your nostalgia just as much as it is on the throngs of excited children that will doubtless be swarming around you when you go to see it. Luckily, Pokemon is one of the few franchises that almost everyone has some nostalgia for, so leaning on it doesn't really exclude anyone from the film's target audience, and it's able to take advantage of our existing knowledge of and attachment to the world of Pokemon to jump right into things with minimal exposition. The poster boy for that nostalgic angle is the film's protagonist, Tim Goodman, a 21-year-old from a small town not called Pallet, who dreamed of being a master Pokemon trainer but gave up on that dream when his mom got sick and his dad got lost in his detective work, settling into a lonely dead-end job as an insurance agent without even one Pokemon partner to keep him company. He's dragged out of that dull life and brought to the big city when he receives news that his estranged father, Harry, has died in a mysterious accident. When he crosses paths with his father's partner, Pikachu, who supposedly died in that accident as well, and who can speak English in a very soothing Canadian voice for some reason, Tim realizes that his dad might be alive and sets out with Pikachu to find him, mend their relationship, and maybe rediscover his lost sense of hope and wonder along the way. Tim is obviously meant to serve as an audience surrogate, but not for the bright-eyed, over-enthusiastic kids who are meant to see themselves in Ash Ketchum. He's you and me, a tired, overworked 20-something who once let his imagination run wild with dreams of grand Pokemon adventures, but who now works a boring desk job, simultaneously longing for those days and trying to put them out of his mind and grow up. Tim goes through things that Pokemon protagonists don't typically have to think about, coping with the loss of 2 parents, a struggle to find a purpose in life, and a failure to achieve his dreams. Well, I guess Ash Ketchum can relate to that last one. But generally speaking, these are adult problems that the adults in the audience can empathize with while the kids are busy being entertained by all the colorful animals. And it's in tackling these issues that the film finds its heart. Tim's relationship with Pikachu is absolutely fantastic. As you've seen in the trailers, they're a great comedic pairing. Justice Smith's tired, exasperated attitude mixes really well with Ryan Reynolds' caffeine-fueled manic energy, and it's always fun watching Tim try to talk to Pikachu without making those around him think he's crazy. But beyond the jokes, they do a lot to feed into each other's character development. Like Tim, Pikachu is searching for his identity and place in the world, though in a more literal sense given that he has amnesia, and this shared motivation gives them a lot of common ground to work with. Pikachu does a lot to encourage Tim to break out of his shell, pushing him to believe in himself and take risks, which causes Tim to eventually let go of his inhibitions and start loving Pokemon and having fun again, even as he's risking his life. And for his part, Pikachu seems to begin finding purpose in caring for Tim and cheering him on. They have a genuine friendship that enriches both of them and that feels true to the ideal that the anime and games put forth of Pokemon as their trainer's closest partners. There's one moment between them in particular that had me choking up. It's far from the most emotionally impactful movie that I've ever seen, but the feelings behind it are a lot more authentic and relatable feel than, say, Pikachu's magic tears bringing Ash back to life. I think it officially surpasses Bye Bye Butterfree as the franchise's saddest moment. Unfortunately, none of the other human characters really match the complexity shown by Tim. Everyone else is kind of one note, at least on the human side of the cast, so it's down almost entirely to Smith and Reynolds to carry the show, which, to their credit, they do. I said a few months ago that Detective Pikachu would be the first genuinely good Hollywood video game adaptation, and while the bar is pretty low, I was right, but it's not perfect. While the core character interactions are strong, the story stringing them together really isn't. The plot feels like it's rushing from scene to scene when it would really benefit from slowing down a bit to let you smell the roses. And it's a little too formulaic for its own good, forcing developments with inorganic coincidences and cramming in generic character conflicts that it just doesn't need. It does that thing where the heroic duo splits up after a big misunderstanding and then they immediately realize what a mistake it was and reunite not 5 minutes later. Any kid who's seen more than like 2 movies in their life is going to immediately know that the split won't last, so it adds no real tension to the story for anyone, and it does so little for the character development that the screen time it wastes really could have been better spent elsewhere. The least effective parts of the script by far, though, are the plot twists, if you can even call them that. This is ostensibly a mystery, but the red herrings are so obvious that they act more like neon red signs pointing directly to the true villain, and the big twist of the film is telegraphed a mile away by a decision to hide certain details that more or less immediately tells you exactly what's being hidden, if you couldn't guess it from the film's premise. I don't want to say anything more on the off chance that I'll ruin it for people who will find it surprising, but you'll know what I'm talking about once you've seen the movie, and it just didn't work for me at all. However, in the grand scheme of things, none of that really matters because telling an intricate, tightly woven story was never this movie's main goal. Detective Pikachu had to do just one thing to succeed, but it was a heck of a task to pull off. All it had to do was bring the world of Pokemon to life exactly as we imagined it in our hyperactive 10-year-old minds 20 years ago. And I am pleased to report that they nailed it. Detective Pikachu is explicitly set in the same universe as the Pokemon anime and games, or at least one very close to it, with direct nods to their continuity. One could even argue that the cartoony characters and Saturday morning villain plot are right in line with the tone established by the anime, and while it's weird to see that translated into live action, I'll concede that this mature, hard-boiled Pokemon story still feels surprisingly consistent with the adventures of Ash and co. Outside the film's general tone, much of the credit for that goes to the production designers, who did a remarkable job of translating the clean, idyllic world we've seen in the anime to real sets that the actors can inhabit. It's more than a little refreshing to see a modern blockbuster movie aimed at children with zero product placement. Well, okay, if you want to be cynical about it, you could say that every Pokemon that appears on screen is product placement. This is certainly going to move a heck of a lot of toys and video games and trading cards, but what's important is that there's nothing in the film's world that doesn't belong there. There's nothing to suggest that the Pokemon world has just been awkwardly grafted onto ours for the sake of a movie. Even the license plates on the cars have a thin and long European look to them, which is appropriate given that Rhyme City, in the original game at least, is meant to be a stand-in for London. However, the license plates don't look exactly like British plates either. They really look like something out of another world. And that's a tiny, subtle detail that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but it helps to immerse you in the Pokemon world just that little bit more. As does the fact that all of the cell phones in the film feature design elements of Pokedexes, which makes sense since in this universe, instead of pocket computing having been added to portable phones, phone functions were an add-on feature for Pokedexes introduced in Gold and Silver. It wouldn't have been the end of the world if everyone was carrying around Samsung Galaxies, or all the cars in the movie were Audis with US plates, or if Harry Goodman's computer was a Mac or a Dell, or even if Detective Pikachu was downing espresso shots at a dingy back alley Starbucks rather than the Hi-Hat Cafe, but it would have made the world feel vaguely inauthentic, and I appreciate that the production design team went the extra mile to create and utilize their own in-universe branding, like the Silphco logo, instead of just half-assing it or cashing in. It shows that they were thinking of this as a work of art first and a commercial product for children second. But of course, the set design is only the tip of the iceberg. iceberg. The film's realistic Pokemon designs had to walk a very fine line between staying true to the games and anime and fitting in with the real actors and sets. It must have taken a lot of time and work to get these 3D models just right, but from moment one, it's plain to see that it paid off. Despite not being an animated feature, this movie features some of the most impressive 3D animation you will ever lay eyes on. These Pokemon have been given a lot of subtle tics and animalistic tendencies that make them feel very believable as the semi-intelligent wild creatures they're meant to be. And even without the benefit of Ryan Reynolds' voice, Detective Pikachu steals every scene he's in. He moves around in an erratic, hyperactive manner, constantly fidgeting and, whenever possible, downing coffee after coffee as he announces his brilliant deductions and banters with Tim. A lot of thought was clearly put into how this tiny character would get around in a world built for creatures 5 times his size, and watching him navigate the film's varied sets is plenty of fun on its own. Fun is a great descriptor for a lot of the Pokemon interactions in this movie. From a Lickitung with no sense of personal space, to a sleepy Trico, to a gruff but lovable Snubbull, every time a Pokemon takes center stage in this movie is an absolute delight. The Mr. Mime scene shown in the trailers is the high point of a film full of comedic high points, and while I wish that they hadn't given away so much of it in the marketing materials, it still manages to go to some surprising places that had me rolling on the floor. And while the human relationships in the film are a bit lacking, the uneasy friendship between Detective Pikachu and Lucy's temperamental Psyduck is fantastic. The way that Psyduck knowingly uses the threat of its own explosive headaches to coerce others into pampering it is hysterical, and it's so smug and self-assured about being a lazy piece of trash that I can't help but love it. Every Pokemon in this film is full of life and personality, from those in the spotlight to the extras in the crowd scenes. One moment you'll see an exhausted Daddy Pangoro trying to wrangle its hyperactive Pancham kids. The next you'll spot a Growlithe out for a walk with its trainer, stopping to sniff around. When Tim and Pikachu visit an underground club, they find a DJ using a squad of Loudreds to play obnoxious EDM. It's clear that these creatures are an integral part of daily life in this world, not just a footnote in its history. I saw the movie twice for the sake of this review, and the second time through I was noticing so many tiny animated background details that bring its world to life. Hardcore Poke fans, who will probably see it half a dozen times before it leaves theaters, will have a great time trying to count all of Detective Pikachu's Pokemon cameos, and each one is animated with such care that no matter who your favorites are, you'll probably be happy with their representation here. For the rest of us, the flocks of Pidgeys flying overhead, the bug Pokemon crawling on the rocks and in the grass, and the wide variety of Mons that we see milling about the city serve to immerse us in that fantasy of a world where something fantastic lurks around every corner. And Detective Pikachu even manages to come up with some original visuals not seen in the anime or games. I wish the film had been shot for 3D. The post-conversion leaves a lot to be desired compared to, say, Battle Angel Alita, but just seeing this world come to life on the big screen is magical enough, and the 3D effect on the Pokemon, at least, is impressive enough to be worth the increased ticket price if you're into that kind of thing. It might seem a little empty to recommend a film primarily for the viewing experience it provides rather than the narrative. There's this entrenched idea in a lot of YouTube criticism especially that the consistency of the script is the only real measure of a film's quality. But I can't ignore that this is the Pokemon movie that I have wanted to see since I was 7 years old. I think a lot of you have wanted to see it too, and I found immense personal value in finally experiencing that. One of the film's big messages, which I absolutely buy into, is that it is perfectly acceptable to just have fun loving Pokemon no matter what your age is. That's not to say that the movie doesn't warrant criticism, and it even makes some missteps that take away from that core experience. It's clear that they were shooting for a kid-friendly sub-2-hour running time, which makes sense from a business perspective, but leaves little time to really soak in the immersive qualities of the world. There are only like 3 scenes in the movie where we get to just sit and observe the world going by, but they're easily the best parts of the film. I wish there'd been more like them, and less of the big Hollywood action scenes that clog up the third act. They're fun enough, but they're not what I'm really here for, even if seeing Mewtwo do Mewtwo stuff in the real world is pretty damn cool. I also really wish that they'd spent more time building up the characters. That one emotional scene between Tim and Pikachu really lands, but most of the other moments of character development just just aren't given the room that they need to breathe. The romantic subplot suffers the hardest from a lack of banter and meaningful silence, and with every scene that Tim and Lucy are in, it really feels like the writers are just ticking boxes. I know that the real purpose of these scenes is to serve as fodder for building Tim and Detective Pikachu's relationship, but it would have been nice if they stood on their own merits as well. So yeah, I've got my issues with the movie, but it's worth remembering that Detective Pikachu is an experiment. The filmmakers were tasked with bringing to life a world that has captured imaginations around the globe for 2 decades in a way that's really never been done before. There must have been a lot that they had to figure out as they went along, and even with test footage to prove their vision, this is one of those films that needed to go most of the way through post-production before anyone could really tell how well it worked. With all that in mind, it worked far better than any Pokemon fan reasonably could have hoped for in a first outing. Now that it's here, I just hope that the film's creators are taking notes, because if they can iron out some of these wrinkles with their next Pokemon movie, I think this could easily be one of the most engrossing franchises on the silver screen in the next decade. Detective Pikachu is a fantastic first step toward that, and I wish their little grape-sized lungs luck in handling the next 100,000 ahead of them. Those are my thoughts on the movie, but I'd love to hear yours, so let me know in the comments below what your favorite moments and mons were and why. Consider hitting the like button if you liked the video, of course, and subscribing if you want to see more videos about anime, video games, and sometimes movies delivered straight from my mother's basement. I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out.